Hello and welcome. I'm Annette Reeder from thebiblicalnutritionist.com, and today we're going to make some Jerusalem flatbread. I wish you could be in my kitchen right now because the spices are already starting to fill the air and it smells so good. So I can't wait to get started. This is just a delicious recipe that you're going to find the spices that we're using today in almost every Middle Eastern home. And I hope you enjoy using them as well. Before we get started, I just want to thank you for letting me share with you God's recipe for excellent health. And anytime we can add in a little bit of Jerusalem foods to our plan, our menu, I just feel like that just heightens our experience at the dinner table. So thank you for letting me share this with you. And today I want to make sure you understand that God loves you. He loves you with an everlasting love. He's loved you from the moment of conception. So let's get started. So this Jerusalem flatbread is going to include a spice called Zatar. I may not be saying it right, and we have a lot of followers in Israel, so go ahead and correct me if I said it wrong. You can buy it pre-mixed. It used to be just a single plant in biblical days, and it was known as the Ezov, which is E-I-Z-O-V, and I doubt I pronounced that one right, but it's biblically known as hyssop. And the plant is Ezov, which is Zatar, is actually a protected plant. So it's rare that you would find the actual plant as the spice. So today it's a combination of spices. It's a spice blend. And the spice blend can have just pretty much anything out of your herb garden. You could use marjoram, you could use oregano, thyme, sage, any of those. Mix it in with some sesame seeds and maybe a little bit of salt, and you have the perfect blend. Now I made a video on how to make this, so go back and watch that video. I actually used some sumac, which I've already put it away in my cabinet, and that I got from you can get it at the Mediterranean store, or you could get it in those Artso boxes that I've talked about before. And it is so delicious, just a unique flavor that I would definitely want to use sumac in my mix. So ours is some sumac, some thyme, some salt, and some toasted sesame seeds. That's all it is, and we can't wait to make this bread for you because mixing those together, it's going to be delicious. So today we're going to go ahead and make this recipe. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my Bosch Mixer, but you could totally do this by hand. We're going to start with 2 cups of warm water, and to this we're going to add our yeast. So I'm using 1 tablespoon of yeast. Typically the rule of measure is 1 tablespoon of yeast per every 5 cups of flour. Now I went ahead and let the yeast and the warm water just sit for 10 minutes, and that's going to activate the yeast. Now we're going to go ahead and add 5 cups of flour. I'm using spelt flour today. It's just so tasty. I love the flavor, but any flour can do. You can use your hard white, hard red. You can use a bit of mixture of rye. You could use Ezekiel grain mix. You could do all of those and it would be a delicious flavor. So I'm going to start with just 4 and blend that. If you're doing this by hand, just gradually add the flour as you are kneading it. Now I'm going to actually use some gluten. I'm using 3 tablespoons of gluten. You could use 1, 2, or 3 of this, and I just want to add more of a lightness to the bread. So to give you an idea of the gluten that I bought the organic Anthony's Vital Wheat gluten, non-GMO, all of that, everything you want it to say. The gluten doesn't need to be refrigerated, but sometimes I do just to preserve it. So I'm going to mix in these tablespoons of gluten. As that's mixing together, I'm going to go ahead and add in my salt. I am putting in 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to add in my olive oil. So I'm doing 2 tablespoons of olive oil. All right, now I'm going to blend this in, and then I'm going to continue adding flour until I have a really good texture. Now because I'm using the Bosch Mixer, I'm going to go ahead and let the Bosch do the kneading. If you're doing this by hand, you probably are going to be kneading it about 5 to 7 minutes so that we can get the stretchiness, the gluten developed, and so we have very light, fluffy bread. So I'm going to go ahead and let this knead for about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, so we have kneaded this for about 5-7 minutes. We actually stopped at 5 because to check the dough, it was perfect. So I did not go ahead and go the full 7 minutes. And let me show you this dough. Oh, you just know it's right when it feels right. And this definitely feels really good. We're gonna put it in this glass bowl that I have coated with some olive oil. But let me just show you what good dough feels like. It just stretches and it creates what's called window panes. And so we have this, just stretching. You can just feel it. It's just like the best. You could have your kids play with this for hours. It just feels so good to play with. And what it creates is if you should be able to stretch it a lot, and it should open up like window panes. I don't know if you can start to see those window panes, the light coming through or not, but there you go. Perfect dough. So we're gonna let this rest and we're gonna let it rise for about 2 hours. Because there's still some warmth in the bowl from the warm water, that warmth is going to really create a perfect proofing oven when we cover it with some plastic wrap. And we're gonna let this just sit in a warm place for about 2 hours, and we want it to double in size. Now, if you're saying you don't have the gluten, that's okay. You don't need the gluten. I'm just using the gluten to make it a little bit lighter and fluffier. Many times recipes will call for a bread flour, and bread flour is going to have some type of leavening agent in it. So there we have it. It's ready to sit for about 2 hours, and it's gonna double, and then we're gonna go to the next step. Well, you can see that our dough has definitely doubled in size, and we can gently just push that down, deflate some of that. We're gonna just lightly flour our surface. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this out. Oh, I love it when dough feels this good. Yes, and when you can poke your fingers in it, you know you have really good dough. So what we're gonna do is just put this out a little bit on our floured surface. We're gonna divide it into 6 pieces and then roll it out. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it in half and then just cut that into thirds. So we will end up with pretty much 6 pita breads. Make this a little bit more even. Okay, so I'm just gonna work with one at a time. Now you can just do this with your hands. You could just make a nice circle with it. You could use a rolling pin. It's actually kind of fun just to do it with your hands. Just press it out into a nice circle. I seem to be having more of a rectangle than a circle. I may just go with a rectangle on this one. Now, what we're gonna do is we have our olive oil and we have our Zatar. We're going to mix the two and make a wet mixture. And then we're going to paint this on our bread. There we go. So we're just gonna paint that on our bread. Oh, wow. I just can't get over the smell of this. It smells so good, the seasoning. Now I have the oven preheated to 500, and I also preheated the oven with my trays in the oven. So my tray is hot. Now you could either use a pot holder. You could go ahead and put a light coating of olive oil on here to keep your bread from sticking, or you could use parchment paper. Either one would be really good. So I'm gonna pick this up and set it on my hot baking tray. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do the next one. Again, I can just do it with my hands. I could do it with a rolling pin. Whatever works. See if I can get this into a little bit better of a circle. I can tell these are going to be so good just by the feeling of the bread. Now you could also top this with some fresh mint. You could top it with some feta cheese, and we're going to definitely do the feta cheese today. There's 2. All right, so you get the idea. Pretty quick work. And these are only going to bake 4 to 8 minutes. You really want to keep an eye on the oven and on your bread. You don't want it to over bake. 500 is very hot, so we really need to keep an eye on our bread. And sometimes the bread can dry out while it's waiting for its turn, so you can put the plastic wrap over it just to keep it nice and moist. This one's starting to get a little bit dried out already. This had a little bit more dough, so it's going to be a little bit bigger circle. You could use this as a pizza crust. You could use it as a sandwich wrap, a pita pocket. You could fold it over, make it into a pocket. You could do so much with this bread. Just be creative. You could make it into a hot dog bun. Now, I know you don't eat hot dogs because I've taught you not to, but you could find something to substitute. So I'm going to go ahead and get this tray in the oven. So before I do, I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle it with some feta cheese. Well, here we have our bread. It is still bubbling on top with the spices. Oh, it smells so heavenly. It's just good to enjoy bread that you know is being enjoyed in Israel or in the Middle East, and realize, you know, we can eat this bread, we can enjoy this bread, we could put hummus on it, we could make it a pizza, we could do so much with it. And at the same time, realizing this is a Jerusalem flatbread, we can also pray for the people in Jerusalem, we can pray for Israel, and we can pray for whatever country you're in, and how God is at work and how he wants you to be at work as well. So I hope you totally, these are really hot, enjoy this bread. So cooking it at 500 for 4 to 8 minutes, you need to keep an eye on the oven and on your bread pretty often. We started keeping an eye at 4 minutes, and then every minute after that we kept an eye on it. Oh, smells heavenly. Oh, can't wait to enjoy this for dinner tonight. I really want to thank you for letting me share this recipe with you. I just love anything that has to do with Israel. Anytime we can connect God's word with what we're eating on the dinner table, that's a plus. So thank you for letting me share with you God's recipe for excellent health. And I can't wait to read your comments about this Jerusalem flatbread. So thanks for watching.